Great. So Kyle, when you filled out the survey for the future of Scrum Master role, that research that I'm putting out, and
Hmm.
you were, and I'm just starting out, so I don't have a big population, but you were one of the few people who said that the Scrum Master uh, can also do the technical roles on the project, on the team.
They can.
They can,
They can.
and that's a minority opinion in some sense. So explain to me, sort of how that view evolves.
Well, part of it's my history. I was a developer and then became a lead developer and then did extreme programming and then Scrum.
Okay.
So part of that is I have a history of being a player coach, as we call it, right? You're
Mm,
a Scrum Master and you actually do work on the team,
right.
particularly on smaller teams. I mean, if there's only 3 or 4 people on a team and you'd like to do some agile practices and Scrum is attractive to you,
Mm,
I mean, that's a third or 25% of your team just thinking
correct.
about the rules of Scrum. I mean, there's not enough work there.
Right.
There's just not. So a lot of my motivation in answering that is there's two. One is there's usually not enough work there. Oftentimes there's not.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure where the boundary of Scrum Master is because I never worried about it. So
Okay.
a lot of times I wound up doing project management,
Mm-hmm.
um, doing some architecture, doing project management, and doing so as the how to say this as a team lead,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes not the technical team lead, but as a team lead, especially if you're not the technical team lead,
Right.
a lot of times, I mean, this gets back to servant leadership, really.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I became a leader of teams is because I found myself doing what I thought the team needed instead of my individual assignment.
Hmm.
But I was an individual contributor, and it actually got me in trouble because I didn't tell people I was doing this,
Right.
and I didn't actually with forethought plan to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I just found myself not doing the stuff that was assigned to me as much as I was doing things I think the team needed to have done. And it
Correct.
wasn't always the fun things necessarily. Some of it was grunt work that wasn't really attractive to me, but I knew that the team was better off having
Okay.
that work done. So that's how I
Okay.
fell into leadership.
What's an example of sort of the grunt work that you did on a team?
At the time, I was more introverted than I am now, and part of it was reaching out to the other pieces of the organization that weren't being informed enough.
Mm, okay.
Part of it was a lot of it was worrying about the team's attitude and
Mm,
arranging events for the team.
okay.
So I mean, on teams, I was oftentimes viewed as the team's mom. And that's just because I would arrange events. I would try to have fun. I would
Right.
crack a joke. I would pay attention to all the individuals when we got together as a group.
Correct. Correct.
So
Correct.
I would suggest things. When we're all at lunch, if the conversation dragged, I might bring in a question and pass it around the group just for fun to see where it went. I would
Okay.
just I would just
Yeah.
do things like that, right?
Right.
I pay
Right.
attention to the
Right.
group dynamics,
Right. Right.
and I just naturally pay attention, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the other place that comment comes from is I've been a Scrum Master on a lot of different teams, and it's a lot of times as a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Scrum is something the team should learn to do for itself
Mm.
fundamentally.
Okay.
So what I do in most of the Scrum teams that I've been Scrum Master in is I look for someone to replace me, or not necessarily. I look to slice and dice
Correct.
all of the things that role is doing that we happen to call Scrum Master,
Mm-hmm.
and figure out who else on the team would want to do it, or if it
Correct.
should be shared, or better yet, could we automate it away or form a habit to where we wouldn't need a person looking at it? That's even
Correct.
better.
Correct. Just give me 1 minute.
So,
Just give me 1 minute.
okay.
Okay. I have this light in front of me and the screen just fell over. Okay. Cool. Okay.
I need better lighting. All right. So I'm constantly not thinking about what isn't a Scrum Master job. I'm constantly thinking about things that need to be done for the good of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to do those to start myself, and then I tend to look for others who are interested in whatever that task is. So a common one is leading the daily Scrum.
Mm-hmm.
So especially if I'm kickstarting a team new to Scrum, and I'm viewed as the expert.
Yeah.
That's a really nice thing to do because I can come in, if they're open to it, I can come in really directive.
Mm-hmm.
I have this 4 to 6 week thing in my mind.
Yeah.
If I'm going to live with them and be a full-time team player.
Correct.
I'm trying to work my way out of most of the Scrum Master roles, most of the responsibilities.
Yeah.
In 4 to 6 weeks.
Correct.
So what happens to those responsibilities? Well, there's no pat answer. Sometimes it's past the. Sometimes we rotate who facilitates the daily stand-up Scrum.
Okay.
Sometimes that rotates among team members. Sometimes it rotates among team members except for 2 people who don't want to do it. If the team's okay with that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? That causes resentment, I'm not. But sometimes, it's whatever. Mm-hmm. Whoever wants to do whatever. Sometimes I let things drop on purpose.
Right?
I just stop doing something.
Correct.
And see if they complain. And if they complain, they might ask me to do it. And I might tell them, you think it's worth doing? That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Would you like to do it yourself? Or the reason I stopped? Or I'll let them in on the experiment at that point in time. But constantly running these behavior experiments, trying to get people to share more responsibility and automate our way out of things and get the right habits in place to where we don't need to remind ourselves.
Right. And, I'm a consultant too. So same kind of role, go in there and sometimes do the Scrum Master role. But one of the things that I have done is there is, let's say, the technical architect and the technology folks. But you need a solution architect, someone who can sort of get it all together. So sometimes I've played that role, getting the business and the technology and everything else sort of in a package, thinking of the similar solution, so to say.
Right. That's a liaison role across multiple stakeholders. It's oftentimes kind of beyond what the technical architect oftentimes wants to do, really.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the technical architect would like to stay technical most of the day.
Yeah.
And doesn't want to have to explain in simplistic terms for the 4th time for the 4th audience or to the same person for a 3rd time.
Yeah.
And that is important to do.
It is.
So, yes.
Okay. So that's that's one line of thinking. The other is as I've been doing this surveys and talking to people, there have been people who come back and say, yes, when you start a new team, you do need a kind of a Scrum Master, maybe even full time, so that the team gets going. Mm-hmm. And when they reach a certain level of maturity, then you maybe not first of all, you may not need a Scrum Master full time. You may not need one at all. Mm-hmm. That's another option. But it sort of starts to say that when the team reaches a certain level of maturity, what in your mind are sort of the signs that a team has reached that level of maturity?
I'm looking for them to have the confidence to estimate their own work under pressure, estimate their own work, and fall back to what they know works, and trust their own data. Take and trust their own data. I think those are the hallmarks to me. And what that looks like frequently in a consulting engagement is if let's say we kickstarted the team and we were very directive to start and they were new to Scrum and new to Agile. Yeah. So that if we were doing that and we go and we put extreme programming on it, just to take the extreme example. So now we're pair programming, we're doing test-driven development. These are things they haven't done in the past.
Right.
This might take longer than 4 to 6 weeks if we do that much. But if we do that, there comes a point where, so you start by saying you have to update all the tasks if you want to do formal Scrum. All the tasks in the stories we signed up to every day. And you want to make that the minimum amount of effort. You want to make it casual.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work to get people to actually do that.
It does.
So then there comes a point where the data is not up to date, and you want peer pressure to take over.
Mm-hmm.
So in this progression, what that might look like is there's one or two people on the team who don't update their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the daily Scrum that's supposed to be 15 minutes long, I just play fast and loose, and I just don't let them off.
Mm-hmm.
I just politely say, "Oh, well, let's just update that now. Then I'll do it. How much is left on this one? How much?" Right. I just do that.
Right.
I don't tell them I'm doing this. Right. I just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, the stand-up might take 20 minutes, and people are rolling their eyes. That's good. That's peer pressure. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I just cheerfully do it anyway, right? After a while, everybody's doing it. Then does the team own their own data? I'm really big on this. This is one of my acid test maturity points.
Mm-hmm.
So if they own their own data, then when somebody comes in and says, and they really own their own process, and it's Scrum, when an external stakeholder comes in or a manager or an executive comes in and demands some estimate, estimate this and tell me by 2:00 this afternoon, whether they accept that challenge or not, the question is, do they go back and estimate it the way they always have and they know? That's the question. Or do they revert back to previous behavior?
Right. Which
is always interesting. So normally what I'm looking for in fact, I put a timeline together for this. I was an enterprise coach at a major insurance company. We had to have a profile of what an engagement looked like, a theoretical engagement,
right,
to try to gauge, coaching capacity and all the rest.
Correct.
And what it looked like is we worked our way out of it in about 3 months.
Okay.
But it was 100% up front, and then it would tail off. And we had some milestone events. And one of the milestones I really look for is when crisis hits the team. The first time the crisis hits the team, they turn to the lead, me, and I help them through. And I help them as lightweight as I can, but I actually drive probably. Probably the first crisis I'm driving.
Correct.
Then the second crisis or perturbation that happens, they call me and I act like I'm going to do that, but I actually don't. I sit in the room and I just ask questions. I take the Socratic method if it's perfect, right?
Right.
If you're really good, you can just say, well, I guess we should estimate this stuff. How do you guys want to go about that?
Right.
And they might say, well, what are the epics? Well, that's a good starting point. I'm pretty obvious. I'm not too subtle. So they know I'm doing this trick. Right? The point is, when another one hits, they'll call me up and I can say, but last time when you called me, I didn't do anything.
Right.
Remember what happened? Right?
Right.
At that point, they know that they know.
Correct.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's take it from a different angle and talk about from an individual perspective, from an individual sort of career growth or progression perspective. I've talked to Scrum Masters who have either come from technology, like you came from technology or from technical track. There are Scrum Masters who came from a business analyst sort of track. There are some Scrum Masters who were like managers or domain managers and they became Scrum Masters. There are some who came from testing and they became Scrum Masters. As an individual person, as a role or growth path, where should the Scrum Master sort of think about themselves in terms of growth? Where should they go? Or what have you seen? Where do Scrum Masters go from a growth perspective? Or is that even relevant in how things are
That's a good question.
Yeah. That's the
I
other
don't know if
angle.
it's relevant.
Is it
That's
even
a really
relevant?
good question.
Correct.
Really good question. You said relevant. I don't know relevant to what, but it's a really good question. I like it. I've seen... well, if we think about the standard corporate hierarchies, and especially from our culture, Western culture, U.S. culture, if we think about it in those terms, the standard, it's outdated now. Millennials don't think this way, by the way. But the standard traditional would be you want to move up the org chart and up the influence curve. And what that looks like is you're going to get closer to product road mapping. You're going to get closer to product. Going to start, you're going to participate more and more in the Scrum of Scrums if that's those types of events are going on. You're going to get more budget accountable. You're going to start being able to, if you're really good, you'll be able to start explaining what's going on in all the Scrum teams and not use Scrum words.
Correct.
That would be a natural progression. Now you're learning to influence others, and you're learning the real value of Scrum, which has nothing to do with story points and velocity and the rest of it. That's just techniques to deliver business value, get better visibility, get faster feedback, those types of things, which has real business value. So when you're talking to finance people, it might be natural for you to talk about the size of team and team days or team weeks, because the finance people are converting that to salary cost.
Correct.
Burden.
Correct.
And it's the way they think, and it's fine to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. When you're talking to marketing, you might have a very different conversation that talks about how Agile and Scrum lets you run experiments much more quickly so you can get feedback a lot quicker to validate your marketing direction.
Correct.
That's the real power of Agile.
Correct. And
it's a very different conversation.
Right. You mentioned getting, one of the things you mentioned is getting closer to product. Getting closer and customer and client and external facing. Does that, and you if you look at sort of job postings or even the way people hire, they do hire in that lens. I want someone who is good in financial, even if it's Scrum Master, right? I want someone who is good in healthcare. I want that sort of profile of a person. So I agree with when you say product. When you think about product, I'm thinking that's going to be more and more relevant and important to understand the ecosystem around product or the service that you're providing. It is.
Yeah. There's a lot of stakeholders. And the other big, the directions that the industry is taking right now is DevOps. Correct. Which is a cultural change that's a natural progression from Agile.
Correct.
Right? It's very natural.
Right.
There's a lot of overlap.
It is.
So I guess one of the things, Scrum is good as a starting point in many cases, if you understand the assumptions in back of it, which is important. It's hard to, if you are a project manager out of the traditional mold, PMI certified, say, it might be hard to understand the real value of these Agile approaches until you've done them a bit. But if you understand why we're doing, what the value of each of the practices is, and how they connect to each other, once you understand that, then you can tailor these things. And coming back to your question of what's the natural next progression, that's a fascinating question, and it scares me. And here's why. I've done some career mentoring and counseling along the way. And without knowing, it's very hard for me to give any blanket statement, because what I want to know is, on this journey through your career and what you've done so far, what has delighted you and what would excite you going forward?
Right.
That's the acid test question. And that there's no telling what the answer is. And without that answer, I have no recommendation to what comes after Scrum Master, because it's so individualized.
It is.
I can't even wrap my head around it. I gave you the traditional one, which is to move up the influence curve in your own organization. Fortunately, these days, that's very customer focused.
Yes, correct.
Which is good. If you're not customer focused, your competition probably can be more customer focused and will become a serious threat. So, DevOps and customer obsession is kind of the two trajectories I see going forward that I'm most interested in.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Uh, how did you get started on Agile?
Well, I told you how I started leading teams.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I have to turn my light back on. I told you how I started leading teams. I fell into it from a servant leadership model, got in trouble, and then decided I need to go be a lead of a team instead of leading a team without the title. That wasn't working for me. I did that, and it was traditional waterfall, and I was reasonably successful doing that. Mm-hmm. But I found myself in a schedule. I found myself in waterfall in a game of scheduled chicken at a company where everyone's sitting around a table. Yeah. Everyone knows that the due date is never going to happen. We're never going to get the product launched by the due date. Yeah. In this particular case, it's because we didn't have QA support. We didn't have QA resources. Mm-hmm. And no one was filling that gap, and we knew that gap would not be filled. Mm-hmm. But all of the other parties at the table, I was a development lead at a development team, couldn't really recognize the elephant in the room and call it out for what it was. So we all had to play schedule chicken and try to stay out of the perceived critical path, even though we knew the critical path was doomed. Right. We're not going to have QA. We're not going to launch a product without going through QA. We know we're not going to do that. Yeah. And there's no QA. And we can't be our own QA in that environment. That's true. Schedule chicken was disheartening, so I decided to probably go into something like technical sales support or something other than delivery. Because if this is what delivery meant, I didn't want to have any part of it. Then I read the XP book. Okay. And then I tried to do XP to my team. Mm-hmm. And then I had to go apologize because I was overzealous because I was really excited. You learn. And then and then what happened was I realized that all of this was new and foreign to me, and I needed help. So I organized a user group called locally it was called the Agile Experience Group. Okay. And I ran that for like 4 years. Okay. And the object of the game was I needed a support system. Right. Other people, I didn't have time to make all the mistakes myself. I didn't want them to have to make them all.
What better to learn from all these people who get together?
So we would get together and we'd bring in speakers, and it was allied. It was at the same time I had was interested in object oriented, and so I went from procedural to object oriented and learned how to do that. Right. So that was folded in as well, which oriented goes pretty well with agile approaches. It is. That's cool. So that's good. That was my story. So I kind of formed a support group, pretty selfishly. I wanted to give back what I knew, but it was mostly for me, actually. It was largely for me, and it just felt inefficient and ineffective and too slow to have everybody stumbling through on their own. Right. So it was communal in that sense. So I did that. And I started out with XP and then read about the Scrum pattern, and then in 2003 went and took the 2-day class. Okay. This was before it was really a big movement or a org and all that.
2003 was sort of on the fringes.
Yeah,
not even there, maybe,
It was an early adopter, yes. Yeah. So did that, and then after that, got interested in lean software development. Mm-hmm. And so I got my Scrum certification from Kem Schwaber, and then I'm fortunate to live in Minneapolis, St. Paul area because we're kind of unique. We have a lot of forward-thinking leaders here, and one pair was Mary and Tom Poppendiek, who wrote the
I meet them often. I go, I meet them often,
I got to know them, and I hosted some classes for them and such like that. So cool. A combination of lean. So I'm going to get back and answer a previous question. For me, it was knowledge of lean and the thinking that comes with lean, in addition to Scrum practices, in addition to the technical practices and the project management practices that come from XP. Right. A lot of Scrum was already in XP. They just called it different things. So not all of it, but a lot of it. Right. And it was that triad that really, for me, forms the basis of what I still leverage today.
It's great.
So I'll go back and say, what's next for a Scrum Master? Going beyond Scrum, I'm thinking about Lean and understanding how they define waste and what a value stream map is. Those are very good things for a Scrum Master to understand, whether you are technical or not, and whether you want to remain Scrum Mastering multiple teams or become a player coach in a single team. And by player coach, you may or may not be super technical. There's a lot of jobs in a team. You could be part BA. You could be, I mean, the one I'd steer clear of for obvious reasons is product owner and Scrum Master. There's sort of a natural conflict of interest there.
It is.
That's tricky.
It is. Yeah.
But if you're in a really small team, sometimes you don't have a choice anyway.
You don't have to. That's true.
Depends on the team size. So
great. Well,
so all of that thinking is logical next steps, DevOps thinking.
Right.
Big customer thinking, product thinking, all of that. So my latest thing that I'm investigating is something called, this is so off topic.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You're not going to be able to use this at all, but whatever. My latest thing that there's something called pragmatic marketing.
Pragmatic marketing.
Which is a whole course. It's like 6 different classes, and I'm starting to investigate that. It's a way of looking at marketing that is obviously very pragmatic, and because I don't have a marketing background, it's pretty interesting to me.
Okay.
To see how incrementalism, and it's a pretty incremental approach. Incrementalism is baked into pragmatic marketing. It's about fast feedback. There's a lot of similarities that I'm learning.
Yeah.
But
did you know that there was a Agile Marketing Manifesto? Have you seen that?
No.
There is. I'll send you the link. There is a whole thing around this. Like there is an Agile Marketing Manifesto, and there's a group that has created it, and on the lines of Agile, but it's very focused on marketing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there are a couple of the blogs I'll send you. These folks who are promoting Agile marketing now in terms of just sort of a consulting practice or just trying to get Agile into marketing, please. Pretty fascinating. I'll send you those.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
So the other interest area I have is mostly stolen from Jeff Patton, who I'm sure you're familiar with. And it's the balance of discovery and delivery.
Correct.
That's a really high. So that gets, we used to call that organizational learning.
Yes.
That term is kind of out of vogue these days, but it's really the same. It's the same goal, right? How do you, as an organization, actually learn and improve over time? And it's very, from that on top of being customer focused, and product focused, that is a real high interest area for me. So how can we legitimize learning? And should we use Scrum and the Scrum toolkit to actually do this discovery? And I'm thinking, the more I think about that, the more I think maybe not. I think it's a good idea.
Do you know DevJam?
Yes, Dave Hussman, sure.
Yeah, they have this. They have once a month. I think they have this thing on project agility.
Yes, I've attended.
You come that? Yeah, They talk about I think that's I like that direction actually. I think that is a good direction, and they talk about these circles of discovery and delivery and discovery and delivery and together sort of.
And measurement and plan, do, check, loops, all of it. Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. So all of this presents a landscape and models and techniques that can really help. So back to your question.
Correct.
What would be? That's my answer. It's a long answer. That's my answer to what comes after Scrum Master.
Correct.
All of these things are very valuable, interesting, and there's a lot of experiments to be run, and there's a lot of learning on the organizational and the team and the individual level. So without understanding what drives an individual, I have no answer for what comes after. I can't wrap my head around it. It's an exciting time now.
It is.
There's lots of options.
And challenging too.
Very.
It is.
They're
Well,
mostly people problems.
yeah, yeah. Well, I know you have to go. It's very close to 5. But thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thanks for this, wonderful thoughts and discussion. Thank you.
I appreciate being part of this. I'm looking forward to seeing the results.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting this together. I appreciate it.